YouTube, will you like, share, and subscribe? Good morning, YouTube. Welcome back to the show. I've moved from Twitch and I've moved the full podcast onto YouTube. I just feel like YouTube is just a better streaming platform for me. I'm not really streaming gaming content right now, so I just felt like the type of podcast and the type of show that I put out here is probably better suited to YouTube. My guest today is a guy that I used to work with, but since then he has done a lot of different things. He's been on The Bachelor. He's started his own YouTube channel. He started his own Football Challenge FC channel. He started doing his own football challenges. So yeah, I'll put links in the description to what he's doing. In this video, we talk about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts, and that's football in South Africa, Bafana, the local football league and what's happening there, and why footballers in South Africa just don't tend to make it, and why we are so far behind as a country when it comes to football. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe, and yeah, enjoy the video. So then Bachelor happened, then I suppose you go back to real life. And what does real life look like now? What are you doing? Tell me. I also want to know about FChallengeSA, because your Instagram posts are like very broad, and I'm trying to hone in on what is Brad actually doing with this, and where do you want this to go?
Okay, cool, man. It's a very good question, and thanks for that. I think we started out very uncertain. So what happened was, after the Bachelorette, I decided to take a bit of a sabbatical away from work. Luckily, I had a bit of savings built up, and I think after that whole experience, there's highs and lows on the show. So you just need to sort of take a break from work, take a break from life a bit. So fortunately, just took a break, and while I was taking a break, I thought, let me just challenge convention, see if I can make dreams come true. A few years back, I decided I wanted to do like these crossbar challenges type initiatives.
That's cool.
And then earlier this year, it was in April this year, I decided, okay, I don't know if you've heard of the F2.
Of course, F2 freestylers. I mean, who hasn't heard of them? Who can have a football podcast and not heard of the F2?
So that's where the inspiration came from. So I've known the F2 since, I've followed their videos since like 2013. I stayed in the UK, but when I was staying in the UK all the way back then, I was going to places like Old Trafford, going to Wembley, going to Camp Nou. So like visiting the best stadiums in the world, seeing the best teams play. And I was just inspired. So I think the game plan was to bring a similar concept to South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I had this ambitious idea of doing crossbar challenges at the biggest stadiums in South Africa.
I say, bro, like you're good. You're a good footballer, but I don't know if you can repeat some of the magic that those two do.
You'll be surprised. I don't know if you've seen some of our football challenge videos. I don't know if you've seen it at the big stadiums that we've gone to.
No, definitely better than me. I mean, I definitely can't compare. So you wanted to bring that here, and how's it going?
Yeah. So I guess what we try to identify is like, where do we sort of fit into the whole thing? So we've actually just completed a nationwide tour for the FC Challenge. We went to the 4 biggest cities for football in this country. We approached a few of the stadiums, got into the stadiums. And it was also about just inspiring others and creating dreams for others, especially the young footballers in this country. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to bring back the spirit from the 2010 FIFA World Cup, where everyone was, unified and together and happy. And we wanted to bring that back into the country like 11 years later. So that was the vision. In our latest challenge, which is coming out soon, we have like a 7-year-old footballer, show his skills. We have guys from disadvantaged communities show their skills at one of the biggest stadiums on the African continent. And this is what it's about. It's about the love of football, showing passion for the game, giving people a platform. And that's what the football challenge is about. It's just about promoting positivity through football, skill, that people shouldn't give up on their dream, whether it's football related or not. I think people should still dream, because in this country we have so many football supporters. South Africa, we're one of the most passionate countries around. However, the quality of our football teams doesn't really reflect the quality of our ability, around the country. Like
All the
if you
passion.
say that, if you look at all the passion. If you look at
Mm.
South Africa's ranking in 1996, we were in the top 10 in the world. Now we're in the 70th, around 70th in the world or so.
Mm-hmm.
And look, we're in FIFA World Cup qualifiers for Qatar at this moment in time. 2 crucial games coming up. And it's all about, can the South African team do it? If they can't, then potentially we need to relook at ourselves to say, look, are we growing our players in the right way? Do we have the right structures in place? Do we have the right support for these players? And can we do a bit more to help the best players in this country realize their dreams by becoming national footballers?
In my opinion, I think compared to even to other African countries, we are so far off the mark. We are so far behind in terms of how we develop our footballers, how our footballers progress in other leagues. We are so far behind. So if anything can help, and it just seems like SAFA is not helping. There's no investment in grassroots level. There's no real investment in player development around the country. So if you can do something independently to try and help the situation, it's going to help those kids. It's going to help older footballers. It'll probably help. It'll help you. It'll help me as a fan enjoy South African football again. Because, when I started becoming a football fan, I actually really started liking football actually quite late in my life. I think I was about 12, 13 when I really started liking it. Even though my dad was a very hardcore Newcastle fan, he was born there and everything. I mean, his first words to me were, "Your real father is Adam Shearer." So, it's it was in the family, but he didn't push me to really enjoy football until I started enjoying it myself. And one of the games that really got me into football was, I'll never forget, it was Korea-Japan World Cup. South Africa's first game, I think it was against their first group game, I think it was against Slovenia. And Siyabonga Nomvete scored that goal with his knee. I don't know if you remember that game. I think it was Slovenia. I can't remember the name.
That's a top memory, man. Because I can't even remember the 2002 World Cup. So if you can remember that far, that means that passionate about that.
I remember that team. Andre Aronson goal. David Kannemeyer at right back, Cyril Nzama, Lucas Radebe, and Pierre Issa or Mark Fish were the centre backs. Then we had Macbeth Sabia, Siyabonga Zuma, Nomvete, Jabopule, Benny McCarthy, and Sean Bartlett up front. I remember watching that game and following South Africa throughout that World Cup. And then I was like, you know what? I'm really into football. And obviously from there, you then start watching club football and you pick a team in the UK like everyone does. And, my dad was like, support Newcastle is the team that I support. And I wish I didn't listen to him at the time, but here I am, it's like 15 years later on the verge of relegation, but who knows what's going to happen now with the Saudi takeover. But anyway, but South African football was something that I really took interest in, particularly watching Bafana. And I honestly, if I never missed a qualifier, I never missed a friendly, even if Bafana were involved. I watched as many games as I could during the World Cup, but it's just sad to see the decline since the Korea-Japan World Cup, where we actually were a good enough team amongst the rest of the African to qualify. And now, unless we host it, we got no chance. So what do you think about the state of football now?
So I think people are somewhat critical of SAFA and so forth. I think I've learned quite a lot over the last year or so. I've gone through, to 9 different provinces across the country, explored grassroots, explored what the people are doing. I think, number one, yes, the quality of football is just not the same compared to what it was even 10 years back. And I think it's also not only South African football, but I think it's the global game as well. So if you look at, the Barcelona team of 2010 compared to the Barcelona team of 2021, it's very different. Even the Real
Yeah.
Madrid team back then as well.
Yeah.
So I think that football in general, it's a bit less competitive. I think in South Africa, because you mentioned as well, we didn't have those established grassroots structures. We haven't developed world-class players in a very, very long time. I mean, we have guys like Percy Tau. We have guys like
But
who
yeah,
else?
even him, he never really got a fair
Bongani.
chance at Brighton, in my opinion.
Yeah, Bongani. We also, I guess we've got a few players around, but we're not producing enough that are Premier League quality, La Liga quality. League One. So all the top leagues in the world, they're not really appreciating South African talents, and I can tell you why. Um, as you mentioned, there are other African countries producing better players. And I think that we are not producing players at the right time to be able to export our talents as well. So essentially, we need to produce players that are good enough at an under 23 level to be able to export them to the biggest clubs around the world. Now, our under 23s, they don't have the ability yet to be able to say that they compete against the world-class athletes around the world. So if you look at our Olympic team that was filled with under 23 footballers, they lost, I think pretty much most of the games. I can't remember if they won one game.
No, they lost all their games.
They lost all the games. So the challenge is that so number one, at that age group, we're not competitive enough. Yes, there is a lot of talent. However, they're not all-round footballers. Mentally, they're not at the right level. They don't have the right mental toughness. They don't have the right international experience. They don't have the right mentorship. They don't have the right coaching in their teams, either in the PSL or in the NFD at this moment in time, or ABC Motsepe. I must say, in this country, we have better coaching potentially at the lower levels. In the PSL, we have a few, less than a handful of international standard coaches. And if you look at the major teams, I'm going to be very critical. If you look at Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs, they're nowhere near compared to what they used to be. So they're a fraction of the size that they used to be. And, people understand that, and people understand that, the talent is just not quite there. And also, the growth of talents in these teams are not there as well. So if you look at South African football, you only really have Sundowns. You maybe have AmaZulu as well to look up to. And then beyond that, it's very tough to choose a team that's consistent enough to challenge on the African continent.
Also, the new kids on the block. So, Cape Town City FC, Benny's team. I'm not actually sure if Benny's still the manager, but they're like the new kids on the block. In addition to the TTM that bought out Wits. I mean, there's quite a few the way I'm thinking of it is there are quite a few new teams that, potentially you think, okay, well, these teams are either old teams that have been bought over and now they've been rebranded, they've got a new structure in place, and you'd think, okay, cool. When teams overseas get bought, the first thing the owners do is they invest in the academy. They start building from the bottom up, basically. And I don't know if that is what's happening when clubs are being bought out. I mean, I was a Bidvest Wits fan because I went to the university. I was a season ticket holder there. To see them get to 99 years and then it just ended, just gone overnight like that. It was heartbreaking. But I just don't think that the newer clubs or the new clubs in terms of ownership and the more established clubs like your historical clubs like Chiefs and Pirates, Sundowns, etc. I don't know if the clubs themselves are investing enough in their academies. And I want to hear what you think about the clubs themselves. But what you mentioned about nurturing players in that under 23 bracket, I feel like we missed an opportunity a few years ago because we went through a bit of a purple patch with players. We had Tulani Serero, Andile Jali, Kagisha Dikhashwi. We had Teko Modise. Oh, of course,
Simpiwe
Shabalala. That team that basically was in the 2010 World Cup, and then a couple of years after that, I think we missed a trick there. Those players should have gone on and done better than they did. I'm even thinking Katleho Machocho. Only Bongani Zungu, I think, has made something of his career because he's played for Rangers, he's played on Gerrard, that sort of thing. But like, I feel like Kermit Erasmus, another one. These names are just coming to me. I feel like we missed a trick there. Why?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what what happened with those players? 'Cause I honestly looked at a lot of those players. A lot of those players I saw live, and I thought, these guys are actually good. Like they could be
Mm.
a decent
Yeah,
player in the Premier League or at least like the Championship in England. So
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
why? So two things. Why are the clubs not investing enough money in? I mean, am I right when I say that in the grassroots? And what happened to that purple patch over a couple of years ago?
Okay. Yeah, so these are very, very good questions. I think the purple patch it's something that it's just clubs not having, continuation plans, upskilling their players at a lower level, allowing players to come through their reserve teams. The MDC teams have not been utilized as much as they can. From what I've noticed across the country, the MDC teams, which is the multi-disciplinary challenge, which is the reserve team, it should be a pool of players that a club should bring in, and a few of those players should come into the first team. But what you find is that very few of them actually make it into the first team. So, for instance, a lot of these clubs have reserve teams, but they don't really utilize them, which is number one, which is quite sad. And then beyond that, I think that it's to do with the coaching and also the standard of the players. So apparently, the standard of our players, or the standard 28, 27-year-old in this country, you could compare them to perhaps a player, around 2021 in Germany, for instance, in terms of maturity, in terms of level of technique, etc. So
technical ability.
I think, I think there's a number of issues, but I think one of the biggest issues is funding and sponsorship. So I think that years and years back. So when I look at the old game, so you look at 1996, you look at after then, you had actually international sponsors looking at the South African game, because that's when we were competitive. We had we were top 10 in the world, or near top 10 in the world. Crop of players which were unmatched at that moment in time. You had Doc Amolo, you had Sean Bartlett, you had Mark Fisher. You had all those players which are world class players who then went into the Premier League. Shoes. You had all these players, and then that produced other players. Benny McCarthy, Stephen Pienaar. These are the players that actually, and then Lucas Radebe as well. These are guys that were not only good at their Premier League teams, they were some of the best. I remember Stephen Pienaar won, Player of the Year, with Everton, and he was playing with Leighton Baines on the left-hand side.
How could we forget
and there
about
was
Stevie P? Yeah.
Bro, everyone loved watching. He actually inspired me. Stephen Pienaar was like, I wanted to be a left wing.
First time I saw him, and I couldn't believe that he was one of us. And I was left to eat humble pie, because he was probably one of the best players, even in the Premier League, for a long time. But again, just didn't translate into anything for the national team, didn't translate to anything bigger.
Well, the thing is, I think in this country, we shouldn't put players on a pedestal, So we say, okay, Stephen Pienaar comes back to the country. Is he going to be the sole player that's going to provide for us? If he's playing in a team which, for 4 or 5 other players can't necessarily play, he needs all the support, So he's not coming to a Premier League team back in South Africa. He's coming back to a South African team. And in South Africa,
there was a lot of pressure on him.
100%. So I think nonetheless, I think our team has regressed over a number of time. But I think if you look at 1996 and early 2000s, we had international sponsors. Our boards were Adidas, this. You had real brands following us. And then over time, it became more, local brands, which is not a bad thing. And yes, we have, MTN doing the MTN 8. We have the APSA obviously supported the PSL for a very, very long period. You had big sponsors. However, since COVID, unfortunately, what happened is a lot of the main sponsors then left the PSL, and that's also forced a lot of clubs to sell, and they couldn't make money through ticket sales or shirt sales, etc. So without tickets and without sponsorships and stuff, that's why we saw all those sales and stuff like that. So I think it's just money, sponsorships, but it's also to do with the fact that if the clubs aren't managed, as well as they can be, think of it this way: you don't necessarily just want to sponsor a club that's not representing their area as well as they could, So For instance, you'd rather sponsor rugby, where it's a shining light,
Yes,
the Springboks,
of course.
competing for #1 in the world. You'd rather
Represents us
do
better, yeah.
sponsor. You want to sponsor winners instead of sponsor mediocre
Fair
teams.
enough.
That's the thing. That's
It's
at the end of the day,
a vicious
everyone wants to
cycle.
win.
It's, it's like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're going to be bad, you won't get the sponsorship, and you just keep on declining, I guess.
Mm. That's it. That's pretty much that. But as basic as that. So yeah, 3 different reasons why we're not doing as well as we should.
So to round off just this part of our chat, how do you fix it? It's probably not an easy question, I know.
It's a simple fix, to be honest.
Okay.
So what I would do, fix our governing body first of all. So understand what our governing body really offers to the sport in terms of structures.
Mm-hmm.
What I've found is I've done a few workshops over the last few weeks, coaching workshops, engaged with people in the Arsenal structures, etc. And you get to really understand what happens in terms of their development structures and so forth. They've got a lot of rules and regulatory things which are in play, reports which need to be conducted, player developments, scorecards. There's so much that they're doing which we can easily implement here. And as soon as we add more structures to our game and more transparency, more openness, we promote competitiveness, we promote youth development, we promote the right values, similar to rugby. So if we can take a solid group of players and start there. So if we look at South Africa, Sundowns, I mean, last year they had an incredible year. They're untouchable right now. And if you take one team, and if one team can do it, and 5 or 6 or 7 other teams can do it, this league will be transformed to one of the best around. So it's like, but it can't take one team to transform a league or 2 teams. It has to be, it's like similar to Premier League. Like you can watch the top 8 teams and you don't know what the result is going to be, So the best leagues in the world are competitive. To be competitive, 100%. We need to up the standard of our game. Simple. Easy.